All right, cool. You made it to step 3, importing. This is the next area that I found there's some to be gained as far as CFM improvement. This area is the intake runner itself, the whole ducting. And when I'm referencing this, I'm talking from the inside where it starts, the leading edges, all the way to the outside, top, bottom, all sides of it, okay? This was kind of a cool experiment. I enjoyed this one because I did several of these ports in different configurations. Some of them I just went down with a carbide bit, and I took this 40 grit, okay? And then others I cleaned it up a little bit cleaner with 60 or like a 60-80, and some of them down to 100, okay? On the ones that I just used the rough sandpaper roll, what I found out is there was a gain of 5 to 6 CFM out of that, an improvement on average. Okay, and I did do some in a little bit, like I said, I went in some of these, I did up to a finer finish, up to 100 grit, 120. I didn't really notice the difference. It was so close that I couldn't really tell by switching it on and off the flow bench when I tested them that I kind of just came up with the average that I would say, 80 grit on most of that will achieve what you need to do. If you want to clean it up just a little bit, maybe 100 grit, that's fine. But I think if you work it with an 80, that's probably going to be a clean enough finish to get those results for you. Now, the other part I actually took, and if you look at this guy, it's pretty shiny in there. If you might notice some of the pictures on it. I actually, in the very end of this, I went through, but anyways, let me keep on the subject here. On the other ports, I actually went down and polished it. I went down all the way, flat wheel with 2 different cross buffs, and really clean up the mirror finish on it. After flowing that, I did notice that those ran a 10 and 11 CFM. So they were a bit higher. There was almost about a 5 CFM gain. Okay, before you go crazy with that, I know that, polishing does work. I'm just going to give you a little bit of my experience on the polishing effect, okay? Polishing it and making it, yes, it may improve and help this engine out at 7,500 RPM at the peak, okay? In my experience, years ago, I used to race a particular go-kart engine called a KT100, and the rules allowed us to do some porting in there. We couldn't really change much of the ports, the dimensions, and heights, but you could clean up going into there. You clean up the casting flats where the aluminum would blend into the steel sleeve. Several of the motors I did both ways. We would set them up, some would clean it up, and others I would actually leave in the rougher with casting flash. Because being that if you're familiar with that motor, the intake tract in there is pretty straight, and generally the castings weren't too rough, so I would leave it in rougher configuration. And what I found that on average, those motors that I left with a rougher intake, now I do the exhaust side and clean it up, but on the intake side, leaving it rougher, I tended to notice that those had a little bit better reacceleration and a little better in the torque curve, more of the usable power. It wasn't huge, big difference, but it just seemed throttle response was slightly better. So my belief is that by leaving it a little bit rougher, when the air and fuel goes into there, an extra roughage allows a little bit of swirling action to help the air and fuel become more volatile, to make it better ignition. So, and if you're familiar with racing, a usable torque band is more important to winning the race than it is to have a high horsepower peaky motor as far as the driving goes and driving ability. So something to consider when you go in there, and then if you're going to polish it up, the gains and stuff like that. As far as for me, Sometimes when I do people's work on intake, I'll put that extra shine in there because it's ingrained in people's head that if they don't see that shine in there, they think, "Whoa, it's not going to perform." But the reality is, it's very tedious work, and yeah, it did give a little bit of gain, but honestly, I think it will hurt you a little bit as far as your torque curve goes, and it's a lot of extra time. Okay. That's the end of step number 3. So stay tuned, and I'm going to go into step 4, the next area that you can work and pick up a little bit more CFM.